Mr. Kaunda, I would like to ask you about democracy, because in former Soviet Union, I'm always asked, what is democracy? What does it mean to you? So I would actually like to ask you the same question. What is democracy? What does it mean to you?
Well, basically, democracy is what the founding fathers of America referred to as government of the people, by the people, and for the people. But that's the top layer of that definition. We must give practical interpretation to this. For example, in Zambia, I would like to see, and it is important that it is established, an independent electoral commission which is not controlled by the government or by the party in power. It's important. You must have an independent mass media, television, radio, newspapers, dailies, weeklies, all of which give an opportunity to differing points of view being aired so that the voters have a chance to choose something from so many ideas, so many programs. They will not be democratically elected, those who go into power with limited mass media, limited information. The press must always be free for every view, every point of view to be understood. Briefly speaking, this is the basis of what I would call democracy that is meaningful. If you don't have that, you will not protect the ballot. And I consider myself that the ballot is no doubt the most important item discovered by man in the field of politics. The ballot must be, secret ballot that is, must be protected by what I've said already. That's how I see this briefly.
With the demise, the breakup of the Soviet Union, what changed for your country and what effects did it have on Africa as a whole?
Well, during the time of the Soviet Union, or when the Soviet Union existed, there were obviously two areas which were vying for many parts of the world. The East, which was represented by the Soviet Union, and the West, represented by many countries in the West, led by USA. That was the situation. And almost every item on the agenda, international agenda, was governed by the influence or by the presence of these two blocks, the Eastern Bloc and the Western Bloc. Obviously, now that the Eastern Bloc is no more, it means there's only one bloc now left. That's the West. And that makes a whole difference, of course, because now it is one area which is in existence, and the balance that was there before is no longer there. That is why USA and its allies have an extremely important job to do, and that is to see this world, recreate this world anew, afresh, away from the East-West confrontation.
How do you assess the performance of World Bank and IMF with regard to structure adjustment, economic reform in your country?
Well, I don't think that what is happening in my country can be seen to be the result of World Bank or IMF programs. What is happening in my country is the result of maladministration by the present government. The Paris Club in December 1993 sent a message to President Chiluba warning him that unless he got rid of thieves in his cabinet, he got rid of drug traffickers in his cabinet, there would be no more aid from the Paris Club. That was an important observation. It was an important step taken by the donor community, because my country is now referred to as the Colombia of Africa because of drug trafficking. My country is completely destroyed because the industry of agriculture is gone, completely dead. Manufacturing industry, both private and parastatals, have been devastated. When I left office in 1991, there were 360,000 jobs. Today, 220,000 of those jobs have gone. So you have high unemployment, you have very high rate of crime, you have very heavy malnutrition in the population, both of the children and even elderly people suffering from a high degree of malnutrition. So the situation is very, very critical in Zambia at the moment.
But looking at World Bank and IMF, do you feel they do an adequate job?
Well, a lot remains to be is desired. A lot is desired on the part of World Bank and IMF. But in the main, when a government explains its programs to the IMF, World Bank, normally they listen. But if a government agrees to everything, of course, people are the victims. Economic programs are based are there to serve the people, not the people to serve economic interests. So it is important that the World Bank, IMF, remember this all the time when they bring out programs. But as I say, my experience was we quarreled at one time, we left them, they left us, but in the end, we reconciled through agreed programs. We made proposals, they agreed with them. If they disagreed with them, they asked why we're making such proposals. This is what I've seen of them. But that's not to say all their programs are right. Their programs can never be right so long as, or not right, that's right, wrong word, cannot be effective. IMF programs, World Bank programs cannot be effective in our situation today. Why do I say that? No matter how good intentions might be there, they will not be effective because, one, these must relate to the terms of trade. In Africa today, what we produce, we sell at giveaway prices in the Northern Hemisphere. What we buy from there, once it is processed, some of our own raw materials processed, we buy finished goods from there. We pay through the nose. There is protectionism. So long as world trade terms are against us, no matter who comes in, World Bank, IMF, donor community, as a whole, they will not be effective because terms of trade are against us. This point I've been making all along.
Thank you very much. Mr. Arias, I would like to ask you about the word democracy. I'm asked many times what it means, so I would like to pass on this question to you. What does it mean to you personally?
En el fondo del concepto de democracia está la distribución del poder. La distribución del poder político, la distribución del poder económico. Porque en la historia de la humanidad hemos aprendido que si se le da todo el poder a la mayoría, ésta lo usa en contra de la minoría. Y si se le da todo el poder a la minoría, ésta lo usa en contra de la mayoría. Por eso, estas palabras de Alexander Hamilton nos llevan a la conclusión de que nunca hay que entregarle todo el poder a nadie. Y la esencia de la democracia es la distribución de ese poder, tanto político como económico. Sin embargo, hay una anécdota de Winston Churchill que no es muy conocida, y es cuando ese gran estadista decía que la democracia es saber que cuando a alguien le toca la puerta a las 6 de la mañana, esa persona es el panadero. En otras palabras, la democracia es aquel régimen que por el control de poderes, que por el pluralismo que conlleva, que porque defiende las libertades individuales, sobre todo la libertad de prensa, la libertad de información, permite más que cualquier otro sistema el que no se abuse del poder. Sin embargo, la democracia, pienso yo, que no es un fin en sí mismo. La democracia debe ser un medio. El fin siempre es el ser humano, el hombre de carne y hueso. Los pueblos que viven bajo democracia, los pueblos que están aprendiendo a vivir bajo democracia, algunos en América Latina, otros en Asia, las repúblicas que integraron la antigua Unión Soviética, tarde o temprano se van a cuestionar el sistema democrático si esa democracia no rinde sus frutos, si es incapaz de satisfacer las expectativas, de llenar las necesidades más vitales de esos pueblos. Porque, repito, la democracia no es un fin en sí mismo, es un medio. Y si en Rusia, en Polonia, en Hungría, en Haití, en Nicaragua, eventualmente en Cuba, llegamos a instalar regímenes democráticos, sin embargo crece la desigualdad, crece la pobreza, crece la delincuencia, crece la corrupción, crece la degradación del medio ambiente, crece el terrorismo, los pueblos se van a preguntar, ¿para qué democracia entonces? De ahí que el gran reto que tiene la humanidad hoy en día, volviendo a ver hacia el siglo XXI, es que la democracia sea capaz de eliminar la pobreza, de mejorar el medio ambiente, la naturaleza, de acabar con la enfermedad, de terminar con el analfabetismo, de construir una sociedad de mayor bienestar para nuestros hijos en el siglo XXI.
With the breakup of the Soviet Union and the stop of the confrontation between East and West, what kind of effects did that have on your country and on Latin America as a whole? What has changed?
Sobre todo los países que pertenecemos al tercer mundo, creímos que con el fin de la Guerra Fría, con la caída del muro de Berlín, con el levantamiento de la cortina de hierro, todo iba a cambiar para bien. Que terminada la confrontación entre el este y el oeste, íbamos a poder gozar de los dividendos de la paz. Sin embargo, eso no ha sucedido. Lamentablemente para los países más pobres, los dividendos de la paz, o sea, el ahorro en el gasto militar, no se ha canalizado para satisfacer las necesidades más importantes de los países más pobres del planeta. Contrario a lo que habíamos soñado, los países más ricos tienden a aislarse. Hablan de que vivimos en un planeta común, en una villa común, en un vecindario común, que este mundo es cada día más interdependiente, que lo que sucede en Angola, en Rusia, en Haití, en Mozambique, en Ruanda, en Camboya, le afecta al ciudadano de Londres, de París, de Bonn, pero realmente no es cierto. Estamos cumpliendo 50 años de haberse creado las Naciones Unidas y en lugar de pensar en fortalecer las Naciones Unidas para los próximos 50 años y para el siglo XXI, para que en lugar de estar solucionando problemas tienda a prevenir esos problemas, atacando las causas de esos problemas. No sucede así. Más bien hay países que tratan de socavar a las Naciones Unidas, que no creen en ella, que la consideran burocrática, ineficiente, poco eficaz para solucionar problemas. Y entonces uno se pregunta, ¿cómo vamos a garantizar la paz y la seguridad en el siglo XXI? Con respecto a lo que fue la Unión Soviética y lo que es hoy Rusia y los países que integraron la Unión Soviética, se ha prestado una mayor atención a esos países. Esos países en buena parte le han restado recursos de ayuda externa a los países más pobres de Asia, África y América Latina, pero no es suficiente la atención que se le ha dado sobre todo a Rusia. Me parece que Rusia debería ser tratada con una mayor consideración. Pienso que debería ser invitada a participar en el grupo de los 7 y convertir ese grupo en el grupo de los 8. Pienso que los organismos internacionales, como el Fondo Monetario Internacional, no ha entendido lo difícil que es pasar de una sociedad y de una economía centralizada a una sociedad democrática de libre mercado. Se ha actuado con un gran egoísmo, con muy poca visión, con muy poco coraje. Realmente uno lo ve, digamos, en el caso de Alemania Occidental con respecto a Alemania Oriental. Aquí tenemos un país de 15, 16, 17 millones que recibe solo del Estado más de 100.000 millones de dólares anuales. Sin embargo, todo el tercer mundo, más los países de lo que fue Europa Oriental y Europa Central, reciben 55.000 millones de dólares en ayuda externa. O sea, que más de 4.000 millones de seres humanos reciben menos de la mitad o la mitad de lo que reciben los alemanes de lo que fue la Alemania Oriental, 100.000 millones de dólares. Y francamente pienso que a Rusia se le debería ayudar muchísimo más, que no hay realmente una visión inteligente de parte de los líderes del mundo occidental, de las naciones industrializadas de Occidente, para entender de que requiere una mayor ayuda el pueblo ruso para que pueda entender que la democracia que están iniciando no les va a traer males mayores a los que quisieron superar cuando acabaron con la dictadura marxista.
Thank you very much. Mr. McNamara, many times I'm asked about what is democracy, especially in people in former Soviet Union. How would you describe what democracy is, and what does it mean to you personally?
Well, let me say in general what it means and suggest that particular form of democracy, let's say for the former Soviet Union countries, is something that each country should decide. There's a difference between the form of democracy in the U.S. and the form of democracy in Great Britain, for example. And there will be differences between the Swedish democracy and the U.S. democracy. So the particular form of democracy would be something for the individual former Soviet Union countries to determine. But generally speaking, democracy to me means a form of government established by the people, operating for the people. When I say established by the people, I mean that it's established through elections, free elections, in which all people participate. And when I say for the people, I mean that the objective of the government is to advance the economic and social welfare of all of the people. The government derives its power from the people. The mechanisms by which it does that vary among democratic countries. In some cases, there are political parties, sometimes 2 or 3 or more. The elections occur at different times, but there is a common characteristic. In all cases, the governments are elected by the people, freely elected. That is an absolute fundamental requirement. I think governments maintain democratic traditions only if they operate with a free press, and only if they operate with what we call transparency. That is to say, their actions, the actions of the rulers, the actions of the elected representatives, are open for the public to view, understand, criticize, and if they disapprove of, to force the government to change at the next election or intermediate elections if the particular constitution provides for that.
My next question is with regard to the World Bank. You were president.
Well, before we leave democracy, let me make one other point. I think an important element of democratic government is the rule of law and an independent judiciary. So you have elections, you have transparency, the public has full access to the actions of the government, you have a free press, you have a set of laws, and you have an independent judiciary. Those are the elements of any democratic system.
How do you assess the performance of the World Bank and IMF when it comes to their general role at the moment, but also in particular to the development of the economies of the former Soviet Union?
Well, I think the IMF and the World Bank can be effective only in situations where the nation state is effective in shaping its economy and in utilizing outside technical assistance and outside financial resources provided in the case you're referring to by the World Bank and the IMF. And many of the states of the former Soviet Union are not yet at that stage where they can utilize the external assistance, whether it be technical assistance or financial assistance, effectively. So the IMF and the World Bank have provided very limited amounts of assistance to many of the former states of the Soviet Union. I hope that will change. I hope that those two institutions will be much more directly involved in providing assistance, both technical assistance and financial assistance, to the former Soviet Union states in the future. They have played major roles, for example, in assisting such governments as South Korea to move forward. They haven't yet begun to play that role in the nations of the former Soviet Union.
by looking at Korea, we were in Korea last week, we learned that the United States had quite an important role to play after the war. How did the United States support the
Well, I think the
developments?
United States had an important role to play in that it helped Korea move toward a democratic system of government. It took many, many years for Korea to move to its present stage of democracy, but it did so with U.S. help. I think the U.S. also helped to move toward, I don't say to, but toward a market economy and to reduce the role of the state in the economy. But I give the Koreans, the South Koreans, great credit. I think they I'll call it, followed an Asian model of development, a model that I would say was typified by the Japanese experience and by the Taiwanese experience, or for that matter, to some degree by the Singapore experience. And certainly in the case of Japan and Taiwan, their remarkable development was based on emphasis on agriculture. In the case of Japan, it began as early as the Meiji Restoration in the 19th century. But then after World War II, Japan placed great emphasis on agriculture. And also in the case of Japan, they placed great emphasis on education, primary education for the mass of the people. South Korea did the same. And I consider that South Korea's remarkable economic advance, it was really a miracle, reflected what I call the Asian model, the emphasis on agriculture, the emphasis on universal primary education. In each case, Japan and South Korea, they also put emphasis on reducing the fertility rate. That was contributed to by the stress on education, particularly primary education for females.
Do you see a difference between the Asian type democracy and Western United States or European
Oh
democracy?
yes, I think there is a difference. South Korean democracy developed slowly. If you look at it, let's say in the 1960s, it was certainly far from what we would call a complete form of democracy. And I think you might expect in the states of the former Soviet Union to see a similar development. It isn't going to happen overnight. And we shouldn't be pessimistic if it does develop slowly. I think what we should hope for is continued progress. And in some of the states, we haven't seen very much progress yet.
Thank you very much.